constantly reopening of vaults and the constantly changing of the team of auditors. And then there was at one point in between 1987 and 1992, the OIG stopped auditing while the procedure wasn't finished. And then the Mint itself continued auditing compartments based on their own rules. And they said, yeah, and they only audited compartments that weren't audited yet. Well, first of all, they only opened compartments that were already audited. So that's again a reopening of gold vaults for whatever reasons. The Mint did it itself. So that's the custodian reopening those compartments. It's like a bank opening your safety deposit box. And where was the auditor suddenly? They took a sabbatical in between 1986 and 1993. And I mean, the list is endless.
Well, hello there, my friends. Chris Marcus here with you for Arcadia Economics, and especially as we're in the midst of many historic things on the monetary front, especially since the Trump administration has come in for his second term, including our audits of Fort Knox. We've also had the tariff issues, which, while they haven't been implemented yet, have caused plenty of activity in gold and silver. And fortunately, one of the people that best to discuss this with, who has done a lot of fantastic research on gold and silver, although in particular on Fort Knox and the audit history. So Jan Nieuwenhuijs of Money Metals, and also he has his own Substack now, which you can find at thegoldobserver.com, is joining me here today. And Jan, for people who don't know, we met in the Netherlands. It was nice to meet you in person about 10 or 11 years ago. And anyway, great to finally have you on the channel. Appreciate everything that you do, and welcome on in, my friend.
Thanks for your invite. It's good to see you again. I can remember we went to dinner one time in Amsterdam at that
Uh-huh.
Korean place. It was a nice evening.
Yeah, well, amazing. It's been that long, and I guess that was 2013 or 2014. Much different environment. That was really the beginning of the tough times. And now, fortunately, especially after what we saw last year, much different environment where I think a lot of the things that people like you and I have been looking at and talking about for a long time have finally started to happen. And perhaps just before we hop into the whole situation with Fort Knox, we'll take a quick look. We're recording Monday morning here, and we see the gold futures at 29.60. So getting closer to that $3,000 mark. Silver down a bit on Monday at 32.56. And Jan, just any thoughts of this rally we saw, which really started just about a year ago in mid-February, at a time when we were supposed to get a lot of interest rate cuts last year. We got some towards the end of the year, but the metals were rallying even when those got pushed off. And any thoughts or observations you have about what we've seen in the past year?
Well, I think, let's say in the first few months of the period you just mentioned, it was the PBOC buying, but also large Western investors. You saw some, not specifically GLD, but you saw large inflows into London. So that means that institutional investors are buying. Then also the PBOC is an enormous buyer since the war in Ukraine. So that has really changed the whole gold market. I don't know, probably know this chart of the gold price and the 10-year tips yield. And you can see the division, right? The correlation breaking in 2020. Now that is all due to the PBOC. And also now, in these last few months, it's also due to very high demand in the US, located in the US. That's why you see so much physical gold also going to the US. And there's also this premium on the COMEX and people taking delivery. And that's also driving up the price because, it's not only, there's a lot of arbitrage in this. So you have a premium between London, not only London, but let's say the rest of the world and New York. And so banks, arbitrageurs can use that premium to buy in Zurich or London, fly to New York and make delivery on those contracts. But you also have, loan contracts that take delivery. So there's a lot of dealers, investors in the US that take delivery. Some of them might just move the metal, anticipating the tariff. So they just want to have it inside the US. But it's also just strong demand. Um, that's how I look at it. And this is something I actually predicted that, after the war in the Ukraine, we saw immense buying by the PBOC, and if the price would go up, I thought, it would also attract Western investors. So you have like both hemispheres, East and West, now pulling on the gold price, and that's a very bullish setup, and I expect it to continue for another few years because there is so much leverage in the system, in the financial system, and to deleverage that is actually often done by a rising gold price.
Yeah, obviously that's lying underneath all of this, which I think is what intrigues many gold and silver investors. And since we've had the EFP premium spike, obviously there's been a lot of talk about tariffs. I've seen a lot of people in the gold and silver community that think that it's not as much about tariffs, and this is an issue that they're running into an issue in London, which I mean, when you look at what the Bank of England said, would wouldn't like kill any doubts about that. But I guess I was wondering if you can put this in context because we certainly it seems like there's not much metal in London right now, yet a lot of this gold and silver has come to New York, so it is still there. Now, also we've seen the deliveries, but we haven't seen metal coming out. And I think there's often when people see the deliveries, you know, not always putting it in the right context. But like, how do all these pieces fit together? Because if people were getting metal from London, theoretically they could get delivery from the COMEX. So when you see, especially the deliveries, and I think there's a chance we could be getting record silver deliveries in about a week or so. Is it? Do you think it's an issue of maybe I wouldn't say a shortage is the right word to use, but how do you put that all together for people?
Well, in my framework, gold and silver are monetary metals, and that means that we use them as money for thousands of years because they don't perish. So there's a lot of above ground supply. So that means that unlike perishable commodities like corn, for example, there isn't a annual supply and demand balance that you can make between what is produced and what is consumed because we don't actually consume gold. We consume some silver, in industrial products, and some of the silver goes to waste. But there's also a lot of silver above ground. So how I see gold and silver, but specifically gold, but I'm not much of a silver expert, to be honest. I just look at it with half an eye. But in terms of gold, there is a lot of above ground supply, and the price is actually set by trade in above ground gold, and not so much by what's annually mined versus what is consumed, because there is no consumption actually. And what is mined annually only adds like 1.5% to the above ground stock every year. So I see it as a currency, and you can't really have a shortage of a currency. You just can have a price that is too low, right? I mean, you don't make a supply and demand balance of the dollar, and then you say, well, the dollar has a deficit and or a surplus, and then that correlates to the price going up or down, which you can do with corn and all and wheat and pork bellies. I mean, it always works. Deficit, price goes up, surplus, price goes down. That's not the case with gold. Because it's a currency. So, in theory, you can't have a shortage of gold. What you can have, because it's a physical commodity, is a shortage of specific gold products, a big bar, a small bar, whatever, at a specific location. And now what you see is that there is a shortage of, let's say, gold to be lent out, although these lease rates in London are dropping like a stone now. But let's say a couple of weeks back, there was, of course, a shortage for big bars at the Bank of England because central banks aren't willing anymore to lend out a lot of gold. So there were only a few central banks lending out gold, and then also how the Bank of England is structured. It's a book entry system, so central banks bring in gold and then they trade with each other and lend out gold and get gold back. If you lend out gold, you get back different bars. And then after a few years, all your bars are scattered throughout the whole vault. That is how the Bank of England works. And then if you want to withdraw that gold, that takes a little bit of time because they have to pick every bar from another corner of the vault. Unlike the vault at the Federal Reserve Bank of New York, for example, where every country, every central bank has its own vault compartment. So that, in my view, is the explanation for the delays. But now you see it, the frictions in the market coming down and the gold lease rates coming down. So technically or officially or theoretically, I don't know how to call it, there can't be no shortage of gold, right? I mean, some Keynesian economists say, well, there's not enough gold in the world to serve as money. Well, of course, there's enough gold at the right price,
Right, right.
right? So along those lines, there can't be a shortage of gold, but sometimes you have these bottlenecks, and also because in London there are big bars, 400-ounce bars, and then if you want to deliver on the COMEX, you need 100-ounce bars. So you have to ship them to Switzerland, recast them in 100-ounce bars, and then the refineries get overloaded, and then you have another friction point there, and so it takes a little bit of time, and then that's also um, how the EFP spread, how that spread could persist, because it just takes a little bit of time to work with the physical commodity uh, to get it fast to the other side of the ocean.
Yeah, and one quick question about what you just said there. I've heard and I've read the similar comment, although whatever happened with that contract, remember during COVID, they made it so that they could deliver the 400-ounce bars in New York, and I don't think it's ever been used, but
As
is
far as
that
I know,
still an option?
As far as I know, that's a different contract. So what's mostly traded in New York, the main gold contract is GC, which is
Okay,
a 100-ounce contract. Now you can't change that contract. The lawyers won't let you change it. So that's still a 100-ounce contract. You can
gotcha.
also, there is an option to deliver it in 3 kilo bars, but they made an additional contract in 2020, which is a 400-ounce bar contract, but that's hardly traded. So you still have to go through the refinery in probably Switzerland or wherever you can find a refinery to make either kilo bars or 100-ounce bars.
Gotcha. Well, that is great, and thank you for explaining that, because I've been wondering about that. Although you mentioned you can't have a gold shortage, although perhaps maybe as close as we could get is now that Elon Musk and Donald Trump want to audit the Fort Knox gold, and apparently Trump said he would be very unhappy if it turned out it wasn't there. Well, you and me both. So I'd love to dig into that one, and I'll mention again that you've done some great research. There actually have been some audits, maybe not full audits since the 1974 date that most people are familiar with. So perhaps any thoughts you have, in particular, if they do an audit, I'm wondering what you think they might find. Obviously, we hear a lot about gold being leased. You would think someone in power would be aware of what it is, whether Trump and Elon Musk would get access to that information. Any thoughts you have on any of that? And why don't we start there and then we'll go into the history of some of the audits that have been done.
Yeah, well, the leasing is an interesting topic, and maybe we can discuss this. I would love to hear your opinion about it. But if the gold is leased, uh, the gold is owned by the treasury, so the treasury is not really, part of the gold market. They would either through the Fed or the billion banks, they would then lease gold into the gold lease market. But if they would lend out gold to, let's say, whatever, a counterparty, and it's the gold in Fort Knox, then that counterparty should get a lease agreement to borrow gold, but with the disclosure that they can't withdraw because it's very hard to withdraw the gold from Fort Knox. So who then would lease that gold? right? Who would borrow gold that you can't withdraw? The billion banks might as well collateralize that gold loan by, a grain of salt, because they can't get it out anyway. So I'm not so sure that
Sell it
the
synthetically anyway. What's the difference?
yeah, yeah, you could, yeah. But well, then you might as well, sell everything naked. But so I'm not really I don't think that it has been rehypothecated 10 times over. Although it could be, maybe they just keep it as, a backstop to their whatever they do. But then, so that's the part about the gold leasing, and then about the history of the audits. Yeah, in 2013, I discovered that what strangely nobody knew or was aware of or discussed is that Fort Knox was indeed audited, and also the other depositories in Denver and West Point, and also at the Federal Reserve Bank of New York. That's where the four main vaults of where the gold of the Treasury is. And because Ron Paul in 2011 also tried to pass a bill, it was called the Gold Transparency Act of 2011. And there was this congressional hearing, I think you call it like that. And then the auditor came, and there is an auditor, it's called the Office of Inspector General of the Treasury. And he came and he said under oath, yeah, well, it's all audited and blah, 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 whole story and all sorts of documents. And well, the bill was not enacted. But, and then, of course, at the surface, you would think, okay, and Ron Paul also he
Good.
backed off, but I started digging into those audit reports. And if you look at an audit report now of let's say Fort Knox, it's just the gold and the compartments and whatever, it's hardly mentioned. It's just like a financial statement audit. KPMG signs it off, and that's that. So I started looking into the history of all these audits. I mean, when were the compartments opened? There are 42 compartments spread over three depositories. They started in 1974. What happened? So I fired a bunch of freedom of information requests at the Mint, the Treasury, the Fed, the OIG, which is the auditor. And when I collected all that data, I found a lot of problems, anomalies, just auditors, sorry for my French, fucking up their work. And in the procedures in the 70s, it was very clear, right? So we all know this media event in 1974. It was in September. 100 journalists were invited with a bunch of congressmen to go into the vault. One compartment was opened, and the director of the Mint, Mary Brooks, showed the gold. Wow, 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 wow! Everybody could touch it. Um, of course, that's not an audit, but then they started real audits. I believe they audited 10% that year, and that included counting the gold, weighing, taking assay tests. And the plan was to do 10% every year and then be finished in 1983. And every compartment that they would audit, they would seal with it's called an official joint seal. So it's audited, you put a seal on it. If you open it again, the seal was broken, and then something is off, and the gold inside has to be audited again. So those seals are meant to be that. Oh, great! This is the event. Yeah, this is the vault door, and then you come into the vault room where the compartments are. Um, So, the purpose of the seals was to, do these audits of a compartment once, so you don't have to do it again annually or whatever.
Yep.
But I found out that nearly every compartment has at least been reopened after 1974 or whatever date after that, reopened once, some twice, or maybe even three times.
And they acknowledge that as
No, no,
well.
no, no, no. That is exactly what the OIG didn't mention in. They completely avoided this whole subject during the congressional hearing in 2011. The constantly reopening of vaults and the constantly changing of the team of auditors. And then there was at one point in between 1987 and 1992, the OIG stopped auditing while the procedure wasn't finished, and then the Mint itself continued auditing compartments based on their own rules. Um, and they said, yeah, and they only audited compartments that weren't audited yet. Well, first of all, they only opened compartments that were already audited. So that's again a reopening of gold vaults for whatever reasons. The Mint did it itself. So that's the custodian reopening those compartments. It's like a bank opening your safety deposit box. And where was the auditor suddenly? They took a sabbatical in between 1986 and 1993. And I mean, the list is endless. I mean, they did re-audits in between 1983 and 1986, then a bunch of re-audits again in between 1993 and 2008. And then during the congressional hearing in 2011, you know what? The gold at the Fed had never been audited. So they were busy since 1974. They finally completed the audits at the Mint because most of the gold is stored at the Mint in 2008, and there were still 400-500 tons at the Fed, and they never audited. How come you 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 can't audit that gold for decades? You know, there is so much wrong with these audits and with also with lying. It's just, I mean, the auditors have lied about, you know, that for example, the Mint re-audited compartments. The Mint was not supposed to audit the gold, but the Mint re-audited compartments that were not audited before. That's not true. I mean, I have just, you know, for a fact, they reopened compartments time and time again, and they can't give me an explanation. Now, I've been also with these freedom of information requests. You have contacts at the OIG, at the auditor, and you know, I just have this guy's email address, and you know, I mean, can you explain about all these reopening of compartments? And he can't give me a an explanation. Then I started thinking maybe I'm
But
overseeing
he does
something.
acknowledge to you that they have been reopened multiple
Oh
times.
yeah,
Not
oh
denying that.
yeah, yeah, even more than I thought. The explanation he gave is that sometimes the gold had to be moved, which is, of course, you know, it never moved from Fort Knox. There was in 1982, in the beginning of 1982, there was a one movement from San Francisco to West Point, I believe. It had nothing to do with Fort Knox. So, you know, I mean, I could write a book about this. And then, you know, this year when Trump started about it, I wrote him an open letter and said, well, I hope you do. This, you know, please have a look at my previous articles about this. I can give you a brief summary of what I have found in the past about, you know, yeah, that's this article about that things happened that precisely were not supposed to happen, and that is, you know, sealed compartments being reopened time and time again. Nobody, it was covered up. They can't give an explanation, etc. So, you know, go in there, do it again, hire a independent external auditor who knows something about gold, because also the auditors in the 80s and 90s used the wrong scales, and they messed up with assay tests, and it just, and they hired kids from schoolyards to count the gold, and it was just, you can't make it up. So you need professionals. Do it again, and hopefully, you know, I hope the gold is there, and I hope we can put it to rest then. But until then, I keep, you know, pounding the tables.
I love that you mentioned the scales, and I'm picturing some guy saying, "Wow, that's a lot of ounces over there." Like, no, Bill, those are grams. Oh my bad. And
Yeah,
uh,
but they set the scale on. You have two kinds of ounces. You have troy ounces and some kind
yeah,
of French avoir du poids.
the auditor doesn't know that part yet. That's good. By the way, you mentioned in there you should write a book about this someday, and I will vote for that now. I mean, it's fascinating what you just shared in the last couple of minutes, let alone all the stuff behind that. And just I'll mention one of the things I particularly enjoy about your writing, and I'll put the link to this one in the description field. But I mean, you're not just giving secondhand accounts, as people can see here. I mean, there's documents pasted in there, which I don't know. I always like it when I'm reading the research. So I guess the perhaps the last question on that one, it doesn't sound good. I mean, when you think about all the stuff that on my channel, Money Metals, your columns, the Gold and Silver, Kitco, wherever. I mean, pretty much the main thing that I think gold and silver people want, especially when it comes to storage, is knowing that they can get their metal safely or that they can have it to them. And it's like if you called a bullion dealer and they described their situation like what you just said with the Fort Knox. I mean, that would, I don't know anyone, I don't know that I know that would put their metal there. So it sounds bad. I'm curious, and this is, I'm asking you to speculate here, but what do you think something inappropriate has happened? I mean, it's weird when you see vault seals being broken that the guy told you that the metal moved. Like, why would they need to move it? You know, in another room underground. What do you think is actually going on there, and what do you think if what do you I guess also what will Trump and Musk find? Maybe they'll find everything that you're aware of. Maybe they'll read what you said, but what do you think has actually gone on, and what do you think we might actually get clarity on?
To be honest, I think these have been very inexperienced people with gold, of course, or maybe that's my hope. Of course, under the gold standard, economists and central bankers were very experienced with gold because there were daily transactions in gold and everybody knew how to weigh it in assay and whatever. And when the gold window closed, already this happened during Bretton Woods when the dollar took over from gold. A lot of those experts were gone, and the U.S. even tried to remove gold from the system, right? So, and after the 70s, no journalist or economist or whoever has been trained about gold. You don't learn it in university or whatever. So I hope these are just a bunch of amateurs and who screwed up big time, and the gold is still there. But I really don't know. That's the whole point, you know. I don't like to speculate actually because there are so many stories about that the gold is missing, and I can't go into the vault and see if it's there or not, or do an audit myself. The only thing, thank God, we have one way to come close, and that's the audits. So that's what I started researching, and then the only conclusion I can make is that, well, the audits they suck and they have to be redone. I truly don't know if the gold is there. What I do know is that if you screw up an audit, that doesn't confirm that the gold is there. It kind of, makes everybody doubt that the gold is there. And but I don't know what the intentions were of the auditors behind this. I really don't.
Yeah. Well, I think it's darn exciting. I mean, I guess it changes quickly in the past week, but most people that actually own gold or silver, I mean, if you had told them at any point in the last 40 years that we're actually going to get an audit of Fort Knox, I mean, that also the week after Scott Bessent talked about monetizing assets on the US balance sheet, which for full disclosure, he did get a follow-up question about that, said he was not talking about gold, even though it sounded
Yeah,
like gold.
you never
So
know. No.
um certainly a
But
lot
I
of
think
gold. Go ahead.
I think that, what you just said, everything that you and I maybe we also differ in opinions how we see the gold market, but the main like theory about, gold is the foundation of the international monetary system. It's the only universally accepted financial asset without a counterparty risk. It's very evenly spread. It's just the ultimate store of value. And again, we met in for the first time in 2014, so we're both in this business for let's say over a decade, and everything more or less what we expected is coming true, is happening, right? There is a scramble for gold. The gold price is rising fast. Fort Knox needs to be audited. I mean, it's kind of a slow process in a way, but it's all happening.
Yeah, Certainly is an exciting time. And Jan, a few last quick ones. I don't want to keep you too long, but one of the other things that you have written about is commentary from various European central bankers. I believe one was a Dutch central banker. I think the other one was from Germany, and have made comments that certainly suggest that they could be thinking about more than they're letting on. I've also wondered if perhaps there's some agreements in place that we're not told about. Anything that you might want to add there, and perhaps more if we want to get to the heart of it. Do you think this is headed towards some form of reset at this point?
Yeah, definitely. I also wrote another article. I believe it's called Gold Wars, the battle between the US and Europe in the during the demise of Bretton Woods or something like that. And when Bretton Woods ended, and the US tried to demonetize gold, right? They tried to keep the price at the statutory value, which was $42 then, while the free market price was just going eventually to 800. And well, we know that price history a little bit. And they tried to demonetize it, and so immobilized the gold of the central banks in Europe. While most of the gold, because Europe was a very growing economy. It's a continent, but after World War II, they grew immensely, and they earned a lot of gold with that. So America lost a lot of gold because of their balance of trade deficit, and no, I should balance of payments deficit, I should say. So they lost a lot of gold, and all the gold was in Europe. And then the United States, with their power also in the IMF, tried to demonetize it. So Europe was, not happy with that, and they started to think, maybe we need to, think this through. I mean, they were still being blackmailed by the US because there were US soldiers in Germany, for example, defending Germany against the Soviets. So Germany, for example, a lot of things that Europe wanted at the time, like going back to a gold standard or quasi-gold standard, was blocked by Germany because Germany was being blackmailed by the US, with these troops. And then Europe probably started thinking, maybe, in the long run, we have to go along with the dollar for now, but in the long run, we have to think of some other strategies to avoid this situation. So one, they set up the euro to counter the dollar, but they also started equalizing their gold reserves. So if one day, there would be an end to fiat money, which is very likely, or there's a currency crisis, or you get a lot of inflation because of too much debt, whatever, too much leverage in the system, which I talked about in the beginning. You have to go back to gold, and gold works best if it's evenly distributed. For example, in the 19th century, a lot of people, sorry, a lot of countries went on to the gold standard, but it created deflation because there was so much demand for gold that the countries that were already on a gold standard, their gold became worth more. But if that is your unit of account, that causes deflation in your country. So they thought about, yeah, well, let's evenly distribute the gold. And that also meant for some countries like the Netherlands, Belgium, Austria, Switzerland to sell a lot of gold. And that would France, Italy, and Germany hardly sold anything. Only these medium-sized countries sold a lot. And that was to, evenly distributed the gold. And that came, those developments became much more prominent after 2008. European countries also started to repatriate gold. They started to upgrade their gold to current wholesale industry standards. They started communicating about gold very differently. I'm sure you're familiar with these quotes by the Central Bank of the Netherlands about, if the system collapses, we can use the gold to set up a new system. That was kind of, new. So they're very much pro gold, and And in the end, they see a future with the dollar not being the world reserve currency. And so they prepared for that, and that's why they also, for example, the Dutch. I think that's what you refer to, the Dutch and the German central bankers. They started making
Although we
losses.
did hear it in the U.S. here when they talked about the strategic Bitcoin fund, all of a sudden, Cynthia Loomis and other people in Washington are saying they mentioned in the proposed bill the revaluing the Fed certificates. So we're
Yeah,
getting a taste here too.
yeah. And but anyway, and they also mentioned, when they started making losses, those central banks in Europe, they said, well, we also have, huge gold revaluation accounts, so we're fine.
Yep.
So that just underlines the strength of gold and the weakness of fiat currency. And, it's this very slow movement towards gold that is now happening since 2008, but it's all unfolding. Yeah.
Yeah, it sure is. And one thing I will mention, we'll start wrapping up here, but I will point out that again, there was that pause in what China was reporting in terms of gold that they have added. And Jan, you've written several articles highlighting international exchange data that shows that it sure looks like they were purchasing, it seems like about 50, 60 tons a month, even when they were reporting zero. So again, I'll put the link to this latest one in the description field as well. Although, Jan, if there was anything you did want to add to that, by all means, feel free.
No, it's exactly what you just said. They stated they paused for a few months and then they came out, I believe, in October or November, and they said we bought 5 tons, and it was 10 times more. And it just, you can track it, not only because in the UK only 400-ounce bars are, and when those bars are directly exported to China, you can wonder, is it for the central bank, or also because I have proof that it's not going through the SGE. It really is. I've put a lot of proof in there that people can read. So those direct exports from London to China are for the central bank, and that shows us that they are buying 10 times more gold than the official numbers. And in a way, they don't make it public, as in, well, we're buying 50 tons, but they don't really mind if people like me figure it out and make it public, because they also want to. It's this balance for them. On one hand, they want to show the US that they're fighting back against the dollar and all these sanctions and you name it. On the other hand, they have a lot of dollars and they want the most gold for their dollar. So if they would talk up the price of gold too much, they would get less gold for their dollar. So they're doing it this way.
Jan, that makes a lot of sense. And one last quick thing before we finish up. Just, I know you've mentioned that you've done a lot of Freedom of Information Request Act requests, rather. Just anything you could pass along for anyone who's watching at home who's thought about doing that? Any tips or thoughts from what you've learned? I think you have had success getting some answers. Usually they don't give you complete information, but anything that you could say on that?
Well, anybody can do it, even foreigners. So that's interesting. Every department of the government, so the Treasury, whatever, defense, every department has their FOIA thing going on, where you can just very easily, get an email address and send them an email and tell them what you want in terms of documents they have to deliver. You can't really ask them to explain blah, 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 but you can say, I want these and these documents. The National Archives are also very helpful in that. You can also send a FOIA to the National Archives. And what's also very funny is that some guy told me, and what I did is that when they started pushing back on some FOIA requests I was submitting, I was thinking these guys are just blocking me, and they just want to, they're trying everything to just not give me the documents. And what you can do then is send a FOIA request asking for all the internal emails in which my name was mentioned, and then you can see them talking about me, and that's kind of funny. didn't really get a smoking gun out of it, but it kind of confirms your suspicion.
Okay, well, no, that's awesome. So thank you for sharing that. And yes, at home, go submit some FOIA requests. And I think that's one thing that's encouraging. I know there's a divisive view on Trump, yet at least things like JFK, 9/11, Fort Knox, like some of these things that there's a high level of secrecy, some legitimate questions, and at least it's nice to see that part. So, Jan,
Also,
yeah, go ahead.
what's kind of funny is that sometimes when you ask the government for information or submit FOIA requests or whatever, sometimes you bump into someone that's on your side,
Yeah,
and
yes,
and
that's true.
then that can be very helpful. You can feel that. So
I think that's what happened when I talked with Bart Chilton, where he was someone who had seen stuff and also wanted to provide information because he felt that it should be. And so I know what you mean there. And Jan, this was some fantastic information you shared here today. And perhaps just in wrapping up, you could let people know again, there's a couple places where they can find you that I have pulled up here, website, the Substack and Twitter, but anything else you'd like people to know so they can follow what you're doing.
no. I work for Money Metals since about a year or something. So you can find my articles there. Sign up for the newsletter there, and I'm daily active on Twitter. My handle is jangold_. So yeah, reach out there if you wanna, I don't know, stay in touch.
Well, I appreciate that, and I have a feeling people are really going to enjoy hearing everything you had to share here today at this exciting time in the gold and silver market. So, Jan, you take good care of yourself. Please continue doing your great research, and pleasure to finally catch up with you again.
Yeah, thank you, Chris.
All right, and there is today's show. Really fun episode, especially hearing the history of some of those audits, as obviously a lot of people just assume that it has not been since 1974, although what's really going on there? Hopefully we'll find out, although I hope you enjoyed that one at home. And just before we wrap up, I have heard from a few people lately who were wondering where are good places to buy gold and silver, or in some cases trying to find a good bid in a tough time if you need to sell back silver. So if anyone does need any help with that, you're welcome to email me at chris@arcadiaeconomics.com. And fortunately met a lot of the different shops around at this point. And anyway, if you do need help, you can email me at chris@arcadiaeconomics.com. Hope you enjoyed the show. Go out there, have a great day, and we'll find out soon enough what the Trump and Doge board comes back with as they audit Fort Knox.